Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming here today. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to present and share with distinguished guests and audience our roadmap towards 70% employment rate, which was announced a month ago here in Korea. As you may expect, this roadmap was a result of numerous meetings and consultations and negotiations between many parties, not only within the government, but also labor and management and professionals and others. I hope I could convey the content of the roadmap as accurately and easily as possible with this opportunity. This is the table of contents of what I'm going to present today. The first two, considering time constraint, the first two introductory chapters will be touched upon a little more briefly than the other. Now let me begin with the background of why we set 70% employment as a national agenda. The New Year of Hope. This is the subject of President Park's inaugural address last February. The 70% employment rate was one of her key campaign pledges of the presidential election last December. And thus, the new government adopted this employment rate as a national agenda to open a new era of hope for our country. There are many reasons why employment rate is so important. It's needless to say, employment is the key indicator to raise our per capita income. And also, it plays a big roles in restoring the middle class. As you can see in the slide, countries with a higher employment rate show lower poverty rate. And furthermore, it is one of the best responses to our aging. Population aging leads to labor force shortage and weak growth. Now let me explain the current labor market situation and its causes in Korea. As you can see in the slide, Korea's employment rate has been sluggish, which is much lower than advanced OECD countries, staying around 63%. In particular, employment rate for youth and women are substantially lower compared to with the OECD countries. If you can see in the slide, the outline shows the average employment rate of top 13 OECD countries with more than 70% employment rate, while inner line shows employment rate of Korea. And there is also a widening gap in the labor market. For example, increasing trends of non-regular workers, widening gap between large and small firms, rising share of low-wage workers. Of course, there are several reasons, or people say there are many reasons for this low employment rate. First, for the demand side, not only is economic growth is slowing down, but also export, manufacturing industries, and large firms, which used to be job creation engine of Korea, now no longer work like they used to. And for the supply side, as you can see here, high proportion of youth stay in school, not in the labor market. So this leads to the delay of their labor market entry, and thus lowering youth employment rate in Korea. And also, welfare to work arrangements, including active labor market programs, are not supportive enough for the women and inactive population to enter into the labor market easily. As you may know, lastly, Korea is very well known for long working hours. Long working hours is another obstacle to employment growth in Korea. And particularly, this is associated with a low female participation rate by squeezing women out of the labor market into full-time caregiving. Next, let's look at the policy goal and direction of our roadmap. This shows our target. To achieve 70% employment rate target, we need to create about 2.4 million jobs based on our population projections in net within the next 5 years, which is a lot more than forecast numbers. This also means, on average, an increase of 480,000 jobs every year. As you can see here in the chart, when this is compared to the previous administrations, we have to achieve roughly 2.5 times more job creation than we did before for the past 10 years or so. This does not look easy. So the new government is trying to change the overall policy paradigms, as you can see here in the chart, by realigning all the government policies on the perspective of employment and job creation. Achieving the 70% employment rate may not be easy, but it can be done. As this slide shows, we found some successful cases from abroad, such as Germany, or UK, or Netherlands. All these three countries took reformative measures across economy and across society, helping them achieve 70% employment rate within the short time. Now I'd like to explain strategies and policy measures of the roadmap. As I mentioned before, based on the numerous discussions within government, we formulated 4 strategies, as you can see here, and ensuing policy under each one. First, addressing demand through the creative economy. And second, mobilizing the labor force. And third, reform of working hours and work arrangement. And lastly, strengthening social partnership and social responsibility. Strategy 1 is job creation through the creative economy. As you can see in The Economist, despite Korea's spectacular success for the past 50 years, Korea now needs something new. Creative economy is the new economic strategy to pursue a new model of economic growth and quality job creation. And I think later on our next speaker, Ambassador Lee, could provide us with more information on creative economy. What is important here is, with regard to the job creation of creative economy, we have chosen 5 key areas of creative economy. They are promote business startups, create new occupations, and quality jobs in service sectors, and quality jobs in innovative small and medium enterprise, and at the same time, create more jobs in social economy area. The progress of this job creation in these 5 areas will be monitored and evaluated to maximize job creation outcomes of the creative economy. This figure shows goals and plans set by each ministry to create jobs through their creative economy project or creative economy programs. In terms of achieving the 70% employment rate, what is important to creative economy is, I think, it has to result in quality job creation. So to this end, we are strengthening employment impact assessment, EIA. As you can see here in the chart, EIA will play a bigger role than before by providing policy advice or consulting or evaluation, depending on the stages of programs or policies. Now let's move to the second strategy of mobilizing underrepresented labor force or untapped labor force, particularly youth and women. As you can see here in the chart, the proportion of youth and women are much lower than the other advanced OECD countries. The inactivity rate here means the proportion of people out of the labor market among the total population. Let's look at the situation of women. This graph shows that in the 20s, there is actually no gender difference in employment rate. But starting from the 30s, there is a big gap in employment between men and women. So child caring seems to be the biggest problem for women's career breaks. So we are taking multiple steps or policies to solve this problem. Policies will be strengthened so that depending on the necessities or needs of our customers, one can take a wider variety of choices than before, such as taking temporary leave, like automatic parental leave. Or one can keep working through using daycare centers. Or one can take part-times for work and family balance. Now youth, as I mentioned earlier, overall education is a problem for low youth employment rate in Korea. And in addition, according to our population projections, youth population is going to decrease by 5% within the next 5 years. So we thought building a competence-based society should be a national agenda in order to solve all these problems: overall education and labor market mismatches, and also overcome decreasing youth population in the labor market. To do this, we are going to introduce so-called dual system, which is very common to high employment OECD countries. Government will support firms and schools to provide and to promote hands-on education and training. And in addition, we have been recommending employers to hire youth based on competency, not just by degrees or their diplomas. And what is characteristic and interesting for job opportunities for youth here in Korea is public companies are required to hire 3% of their employees every year, starting from next year for 3 years. For your information, in Korea, the proportion of public sector employment is just about 5%, which is only 1/3 of the OECD average. As you can see in the chart, Korea is the fastest aging society in the world. According to our forecast, the size of the world older workers aged between 55 to 64, 55 and 64, will increase by more than 30% within the next 5 years. So, retaining these older workers is very important to achieve 70% employment rate. With regard to older worker policies, currently in Korea, the hottest issue is the mandatory retirement age of 60. The National Assembly already passed this bill last May. And since it will take effect from the year 2016, our policy focus is on how to make this retirement age system become widespread in the labor market as early as possible, even before 2016. So we are preparing many programs, such as increasing wage subsidies for both workers and employers, and also providing lots of programs, consulting or guidelines, and so on. And the third strategy, reform of working hours. Here we have an interesting analysis, as you can see. According to our analysis, working time is becoming more important in terms of a contribution to employment growth. While labor demand factors are becoming less effective, labor market factors such as working time reduction are becoming more and more effective in adding workers into the labor market. Here we have three policy directions: reduce long working hours, create decent part-time jobs, and spread flexible work practice. Our objective is to reduce our total actual working hours by 10% over the next 5 years. First, on reducing working hours, to do this, we'll take three strategies at the same time: legal framework, financial support, public awareness. With regard to legal framework, the point here is, though we have a working time limit on 40 hours of work or 12 hours of overtime limit, but there is a loophole for the weekend work or extended work in the legislation. So we try to revise the law to reduce excessive extended working hours to a proper level. Now on decent part-time jobs. As shown in the slide, while many European countries already experienced a big changes in the employment structure toward part-time work, however, the number of part-time jobs in Korea is very low compared to the other OECD countries. Especially in the public sector, you can see a huge difference between Korea and the United Kingdom within the government sector. We rarely have part-time practices in the public sector. In this respect, Korea is a late mover or late comer. Now, for policies, part-time job is the most attention-grabbing and disputed issue right after the announcement of a roadmap, because in Korea, part-time job has a connotation of a negative connotation as a low-quality job. So the part-time job we intend to create is a decent part-time job, which satisfies the three criteria here: voluntary and decent and equal. Voluntary means voluntary choice depending on the needs of the life cycle. Decent guarantees basic working conditions. Equal means equal treatment between part-timers and full-timers in waging and working conditions. Through this, we are going to create around 930,000 part-time jobs over the next 5 years, which is about 40% of our job creation goal. To create decent part-time jobs, public sector will lead by introducing newly public officials and part-time teachers. For private sector, many incentives will be provided to firms creating decent part-times. Current wage subsidy and increased tax credit and new social insurance premium subsidy will be given all together. And also we'll enact a law to protect and promote part-time jobs more systematically. Meanwhile, utilization of flexible work scheme is not common yet in Korea compared to the other OECD countries. So, legal and financial support will be made to facilitate the use of flexible work schemes, such as working time savings account or smart work. Particularly, we expect that Korea's developed ICT infrastructures could help smart work spread more easily and widely. The last one is social responsibility and tripartite partnership. To enhance job quality through reformative measures. First, to protect non-regular workers, punitive damage will be introduced for intentional and repeated discrimination against non-regular workers. And for public sector, we are converting non-regular workers into permanent workers gradually for constant and continued works. In case of a private sector, large firms are required to make notice of their employees by type of employment from next year. And to protect small firms, we are going to revise the lowest bidding system. And also, we are going to expand the scope of application for punitive damages to unfair trade. Punitive damages to unfair trade to protect small firms. This was already introduced last April. Last tripartite partnership. Although achieving 70% employment rate is good for all of us, however, it requires some cost and burdens to be paid in the process. So tripartite bodies have to make some mutual concessions or cooperation. Fortunately, as you can see here in the chart, right before the announcement of the roadmap, they reached an agreement to achieve the 70% employment rate. As a follow-up, tripartite bodies will monitor the progress toward our goal. Now for the governance and implementation issues. Planning is important. However, what is more important is taking action. President Barack emphasized to us that if planning is 10%, action is 90%. So we organized very systematic reporting and monitoring channels within the central government. The progress roadmap will be reported to the cabinet meeting every 3 months. At the same time, we are going to involve regional government and private sector in the process. Here we have 34 laws and 137 action programs. We are going to operate this 5-year plan as a rolling plan, which means to review the progress and update every year. After some preparatory period of this and next year, we expect our outcomes to be accelerated. In conclusion, when you achieve 70% employment rate, this will help achieve restoring 70% of middle class as well. We hope by the year of 2017, we could see 777s. Please wish us a good luck and success. Thank you very much.